Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. In today's episode, I will tell you the emotionally charged case of Ben Keita. Officials have ruled the 18-year-old's death a suicide, but there are many think that it could have been a hate crime and a lynching.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of our proceeds from our sponsorships and Patreon to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out more, check out our website, thedarkoak.com. Head over to our Instagram, The Dark Oak Podcast, or stay to the end of this episode to find out all of the details.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
And a Happy New Year.
And a Happy New Year.
Oh man, are we going to do another song?
Maybe not today. We'll save our listeners. They're still reveling in our last video, I'm sure.
Oh, it's Dark Oak Time glow. Is that it?
I know I am.
I first want to welcome any new Shiver Seekers that are new to our podcast that found us on the New Year collab that we just participated in.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on over and checking us out.
Yeah, so this is the episode that we gave a little information on. And Cynthia is also just chomping at the bit to get more details because she actually hasn't heard everything that I was able to find out about the Ben Keita case. So you're going to find out at the same time that she does.
That's right. We've actually been talking off mic for 10 minutes, and finally we had to be like, let's hit record because we have a lot to talk about in this case.
That's what I was saying. I said, that's probably something we should talk about where our listeners can participate too.
Yeah, but just from the teaser she gave us on that collab, Stephanie's really got me curious. So
considering this is our first episode of the year, I want to talk about some of the new things that we're implementing at the Dark Oak. The first thing that we've talked about is really working on our Instagram account. So we found that's where a lot of our listeners want to communicate with us, which is fantastic. So we're going to work on some of our Instagram posts over there. So each week, so we release our episodes every Wednesday. So every Wednesday, I'm also going to do a pretty comprehensive post on our Instagram account that's going to give a slew of pictures that relate to that episode. And it's anything, if we talk about something personal, we'll may throw in a picture of that, but it's mostly going to be different things just related to the episode. So it could be evidence photos, it could be crime scene photos, it could just be pictures of victims, it could be composite sketches, whatever it is, we want to put that in there so it's easy for you to be able to look into the cases that you find interesting, to find that in a really easy way, and then to communicate with us about them. So you can leave a message right there. You can communicate with us, get on Instagram. We have never professed being the greatest at social media. It's not that we're old. We've just got a lot of other things on our plate. And every time I seem to get up to speed on an app, they wind up changing a feature and then I have to learn it all over again. But we really want to communicate with you guys. And I feel like that's a really great way to do it. So if you haven't already, please stop listening to this episode right now. Go follow us on Instagram. And again, check back every Wednesday because we're going to give you everything that you're going to need to kind of immerse yourself in each case that we release. And then we're going to release a few fun things too.
You know what's cool though? This just kind of shows how this isn't really like our area of expertise. They don't have to stop listening, Stephanie. They're listening to a podcast. They can go right to Instagram while they're listening and follow us, right? Am I right?
If you are a multitasker like Cynthia, do not stop
Do
this
not
podcast.
stop listening.
You're right. They could probably do both things.
The point is, do it now. Do it right now.
Well, not if you're driving.
Well, okay.
Stop the heavy machinery first and then listen, we need to keep everyone safe.
No, I'm with you. I just love how the mothers in us have now.
I'm having to restrain myself from even warning people that are running on treadmills. I'm like, listen, just don't lose your rhythm. I don't need any exercise injuries. You can like us after you're done with your 30-minute run, but whatever it is sometime today, maybe now, maybe after your run or your commute to work or home from work, go like us on Instagram.
Please.
Yes, please. And also, our Patreon is still growing. We're going to do the same post on our Patreon page, so you can communicate with us there too. We also have our lives on our Facebook page, but also on our Patreon page. So great way to communicate with us there as well. Any other business things we got going on? I know we have a lot on our plate for 2025. I think that's all we need to announce today, though. We're not going to belabor the point.
That's right. 2025 is going to be a good year, though.
Yeah. Lots of good swag. We've got some new stuff for our Patreon members.
Yep.
We've got some great collabs coming up, like some one-on-one collabs, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be a great year. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this Ben Keita case because I can tell there's going to be a lot of discussion going on here.
There already has been.
So for anyone who didn't hear our 15-minute blip on the collaboration, I'm going to fill you in on the details here, and then we're going to talk about theories. On November 26, 2016, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, 18-year-old high school student Ben Keita was reported missing by his parents, Ibrahima and Aissata Keita. He apparently left his home in Lake Stevens, Washington State by himself without his wallet, phone, or car.
An 18-year-old boy leaving his home. An 18-year-old young man leaving his home without his phone?
Yeah, red flag, right?
Something is wrong.
Something is very wrong.
Yes.
Now, his family was particularly concerned because temperatures around this time in Washington State in November were freezing, and his family was worried the cold could trigger problems with Ben's sickle cell anemia. And just as a review of sickle cell, healthy blood cells are flexible discs that carry oxygen to your tissues, but sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia is caused by a genetic mutation that changes the shape of the red blood cells from round to like a C shape, like the farm tool called a sickle, which is how it got its name. And sickle red blood cells are really stiff and sticky, and they can't get through the blood vessels, like they get stuck really easily, and they can clog the blood flow, which prevents oxygen from getting to body parts. And as you can imagine, this blockage can cause pain or also tissue death.
Sure.
So anyone living with sickle cell anemia needs to really monitor the strain that they're putting on their body.
And I'm not familiar with the disease really at all, but it sounds like it absolutely could be affected by cold temperatures.
Absolutely.
I mean, that just makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, his family was also immediately aware of Ben's absence because he was almost always home. He didn't have a huge amount of friends and was usually found in his room, so this was really unusual for him not to be around. Now, because Ben left his cell phone behind, the police were not able to get a precise location to begin their search. Like, there was no way to ping the phone.
Right.
So they began looking through the wide, sweeping wooded area around the Keita's home. Experienced searchers, including a dog trained in detecting human remains, were deployed in the area. With Ben's wallet also not in his possession, there was also little hope of receiving a credit card alert.
Right.
These are always you track people.
Right. I know. I'm just thinking as a parent, I can't even imagine having where to even start when it came to looking for my child.
That's exactly right. You know, they went somewhere on foot, or at least you're assuming they did, or someone picked them up.
Right.
Like, that's a possibility too.
Sure.
But no phone and no wallet.
It almost seems intentional.
Police Chief John Dyer said, quote, "From the very beginning, we have taken this case seriously and brought every tool to the table to try and bring clarity to Ben's family and the Lake Stevens community," end quote. The search for Ben stretched on for days and then to weeks. Police grasped at any leads and questioned his family about Ben's school performance, his friends, pressure from peers, the possibility of bullying, anything that could give clues to Ben's whereabouts. Another limiting factor was Ben's lack of participation in social media. Unlike many of his peers, Ben had no social media accounts.
So he really was maybe an introvert.
I think I've never seen that printed anywhere, but that would be my takeaway.
Okay. But his parents never reported any kind of bullying or anything of that nature.
No.
He just didn't necessarily have a very active social life.
From what I can tell, correct. His family continually reported that he was an ambitious 18-year-old high schooler striving towards medical training. He planned to graduate that year from Lake Stevens High School, and he was already in the Running Start program, which was a dual enrollment program at Everett Community College. He was dreaming of becoming a medical doctor and working as a medical examiner. They had no indication that Ben was being bullied or targeted in any way, like we just talked about. They said he spent most of his free time in his room playing video games. He liked to read, especially science fiction, and he was quiet and protective of his family. But several things were not lining up. For starters, while investigating his disappearance, police discovered that Ben hadn't been in class for 3 weeks before his disappearance on the 26th of November.
Now, that is a huge red flag.
Definitely concerning. Now, just because he was missing it doesn't tell you why, but it's definitely concerning.
It is, and it's not in his nature at all. He's a good kid. He's a responsible kid. He's not just skipping school.
Exactly.
And he's also not telling his parents, hey, I'm not going to school. So this just seems so strange.
It seems really strange. He also didn't show up for his job at McDonald's on the 25th or 26th either. So something's definitely going on.
Oh, this just makes me so sad.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, as you've said, Ben's family had no idea that he was missing classes. And the hardest part about that, if you don't even know he's missing the classes, you have no idea what would have caused him to miss classes.
Right. So much information is lost because we didn't even know there was information to be found.
Exactly. And apparently when a student turns 18, even though they're still enrolled in high school, the school doesn't track student whereabouts, which I was not aware of. I assumed because you were still in high school, there was still some amount of reporting, but
who are they going to
not.
report it to?
I don't know. Parents? I mean,
you're an adult, though.
I know. I don't like it. This is me. My kids are still several years away. Well, more than several from being 18. But I'm like, no, you need to report to their mother at all times.
Well, as a mother, yes, I agree with you there as well. But legally,
I do understand. I do understand. It doesn't mean I have to like it.
No, I'm with you, girl. I'm with you.
According to Lake Stevens School spokeswoman Jamie Taylor, quote, "We don't track their schedule, and the community college doesn't do family notifications when a student turns 18 because they're an adult." End quote.
I mean,
again, Jamie Taylor, I hear what you're saying, but doesn't mean I have to like it. And fortunately, so far this investigation was bringing up more questions than answers.
Yeah.
6 weeks passed with no sight of Ben. Then, on January 9th, 2017, a group of teenagers wandering into the woods stumbled across an awful sight. About 12 to 14 feet from a trail and about 10 feet from the nearest backyard fence was the body of Ben Keita. He was hanging from a rope strung over a tall branch in a densely wooded area just blocks from his home. Disturbingly, his body was found in an area that was previously searched multiple times in the days after his initial disappearance.
Well, and it just kind of hit me. He was only 10 feet away from someone's backyard.
Isn't this wild?
For potentially up to 6 weeks?
Right. Potentially.
That's wild.
When police knocked on the door of Ibrahima and Aissata Keita to tell them of their son's death, they still had hope their son would be found alive. And this just breaks my heart. The initial inspection of Ben's body revealed that he had been in a semi-frozen state for weeks, which does make sense if he was out in the Washington state winter. And this indicated that he could have been exposed to the frigid temperatures for the full 6 weeks of his disappearance. It's really hard to tell once a body has been frozen.
And not to be crude, but that could explain why maybe nearby residences didn't notice anything, any kind of odor or anything like that.
That's absolutely correct.
Even maybe animal activity, possibly.
Correct. Outside of a small abrasion on his finger, there was no signs of trauma or a struggle. The scene itself also yielded few clues. The area around Ben's body was not disturbed, and a flashlight that the Keita family did not recognize was found at his feet. But a closer inspection of the rope would prompt even more questions. The rope, which the Keitas also said they did not recognize, was fashioned into a noose around Ben's neck. The other end was attached to a branch that was estimated to be 50 feet in the air. 50 feet. Just take a moment. Think about 50 feet. That is very high. And even more strange, Ben's feet were 2.5 feet off the ground. However, incredibly, his neck was not broken. His official cause of death was recorded as asphyxiation.
Okay. All the things. First of all, if he fell 47.5 feet or somewhere around about there,
Yeah,
I would think his neck would be broken.
correct.
Also, how in the world did he get up there 50 feet? Or even if he wasn't up there, secure a rope 50 feet in the air.
How did anybody secure a rope 50 feet in the air?
But there's no ladder. There's nothing around that he could have climbed up. I guess he could have climbed it. I guess you could climb the tree.
You could climb the tree.
You knew how to climb a tree.
But then did he climb partially back down? And again, these are frigid temperatures. So we're talking icy conditions too.
Right.
Ice and snow.
I don't know, that flashlight not being recognized, the rope not being recognized.
That's weird, right?
The flashlight, though, really gets me. Okay, because a rope, I'm thinking maybe it was in the garage. Like, I can see there being a rope somewhere on my property right this minute that I don't know is there. I wouldn't recognize it, etc. But a flashlight? A flashlight is something you would generally keep inside your home. A flashlight is something you would handle. Oh, are there fingerprints on the flashlight?
You're getting ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm telling you, this case is really.
This is why I said, you know what? I'm just going to hit the record button because Cynthia just kept asking me a million questions. I'm like, how about you let me tell you the case?
And this is wild.
Yeah. Despite these odd circumstances that you just listed, based on the fact that there were no other evidences of trauma, the Snohomish County Medical Examiner determined the manner of death to be suicide.
You're going to have to tell me how that is what happened here. Well, you're going to have to convince me.
That's pretty much exactly what Ben's parents said. The Keitas immediately objected to this finding. His family said there was no reason to suspect anything was bothering Ben to the point that he would take his life. Ibrahima, Ben's father, told CNN that Ben had, quote, no history of depression, anxiety, or any psychological breakdown at all whatsoever. So he was a very happy young man, end quote.
Now, in fairness, his parents were also completely unaware that for 3 weeks he'd not been going to school. And so it's possible they didn't know everything going on in his life.
I think that's fair. And I think they've even kind of had to accept, we didn't know everything that was going on.
Oh, sure.
But I think if someone was suffering from some kind of depression, especially by the time you're 18, I think they would have seen some sign of it. Maybe. Some people are very good at hiding it, though.
Well, and honestly, the fact that they did not notice anything out of the ordinary for those last 3 weeks almost means maybe he had to have been acting very much his usual self. You would kind of think.
I would think.
You'd have to.
The act of the hanging itself also caused the Keita family to develop a totally different theory as to what could have happened to their son. See, Ben was a young Black man being raised in the Muslim faith. And remember, this is 2017 when race crimes and tensions are mounting. In the Keita's eyes, Ben's death was nothing short of a possible lynching.
That, honestly, based on what we know, to me, seems more probable than a suicide.
Yeah, I have to say, based on the very bizarre circumstances involving the rope so high in the tree, I absolutely think this at least calls for further investigation.
Sure, we have to.
Yeah. So the Keitas turn the pressure on investigators by contacting the media and telling them all about the suspicious circumstances of their son's death. Based on this increased scrutiny, on January 26, just 16 days after the initial autopsy, the medical examiner changed the manner of death to undetermined.
Okay, but that's great. That's great because now it means we can keep an investigation open.
It is. At the same time, I think it's very strange that you could, within a matter of days, say, oh, you know what? I was not wrong. I don't know. I just think that's curious.
It is a quick turnaround.
It's a quick turnaround for me. I'm not saying it wasn't warranted and it's not correct. I just do think that's kind of a quick change of heart. It's the same medical examiner. It's not a new one.
And I mean, it is fast. It is fast. I just know there have been other cases where that's all a family asks for. Please just make it undetermined so that they don't close the case.
And that's totally true. And actually, it's funny. We've kind of come down on those medical examiners for not doing that. So at least this one said, you know what? Fine. You think there's more to be investigated? Let's do it.
Yeah. Maybe he really was he or she really was just like, okay, let's look into it.
Sure. An associate medical examiner wrote this in the autopsy report from January 26. So this is the second examination. Quote, although at autopsy, I did not see any evidence of trauma beyond the evidence of hanging, the circumstances of the very high tree branch, uncertain location of the decedent for the 6 weeks prior to discovery, with a report that the area where the body was found had been previously searched, and lack of any reported suicidal ideation or attempts makes a definitive classification for the manner as suicide uncertain.
So that is what I've always understood the medical examiner's job to be, to not only take into account the injuries, but also the circumstances.
Which it seems that's what they did in the second go around.
Right. So to me, I don't know. I think that makes sense.
While the Keitas got what they wanted as far as having it re-examined, it truly did very little to console them. Their son is found in an area that the police department told them they had already searched, and whether they just missed him or whether he really wasn't there and he was frozen, so they didn't know how long he had been there, they just did not feel comfortable with the way the case was being handled. So they reached out to the Council on American Islamic Relations for help. And again, I want to draw attention to the political and social climate at this time. The Black Lives Matter movement was really coming to prominence at this point in 2016 and 2017. Of course, we would see the climax of that in 2020, but the voices were already being raised.
Stuff was happening.
Stuff was happening. Absolutely happening. In addition, there was a recent high-profile death of another Black teen that had everybody on edge. 16-year-old Hamza Warsam was a Muslim Somali American who died tragically in a fall from a Seattle apartment building in December of 2016. So like right before Ben's body was found. While it was officially ruled an accident, which I personally think it was, there were rampant rumors among the Black and Muslim communities that hate crimes were widespread and any one of them could be the next victim. It was a scary time if you were in these minority groups.
Yes.
And I will say, whether or not they were actually in imminent danger, they felt like they were. And I feel like that changes your perspective on the world.
It is my opinion that they were in imminent danger because there's crazy people out there.
There were some absolute bad apples that were committing hate crimes.
Right. And all it takes is one.
Yes.
And you being in the wrong place, the wrong time.
Yes.
And matching a certain description. And that insane person sees you and makes judgments and you're in danger. And I think that's very real.
And in Ben's case, I mean, it was like the double whammy, right? He's a Black man and a Muslim, two groups that were being targeted by hate groups.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So for me, the fear was real.
Sure. So you have a 16-year-old Black Muslim boy, man.
Falling out of an apartment window.
And many thought possibly he was pushed. It was under a lot of...
That's bizarre.
It's bizarre. Now, again, there are more pieces to that, and I do think it was an accident. However, it was highly suspicious. And what it did, his story, it basically just created rumors that weren't necessarily corrected by the time Ben's body was found.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
So everybody was just on heightened alert. And so now you have another young Black Muslim that dies under suspicious circumstances. And again, his family is feeling like the police are muffing it up. So I can see how they were like, okay, we need to get as much help as we can get here.
Absolutely.
Luckily, groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations exists. So the Council on American Islamic Relations, that I will refer to as CAIR, C-A-I-R, assisted the family in asking the FBI to step in with its own investigation.
Okay.
So kind of like a second eyes and ears for...
Second opinion.
A second opinion, if you will. Sure.
And I'm assuming they can do this because generally homicide is not the FBI's jurisdiction, but because it could be a potential hate crime.
Right. Arsalan Bukhari, executive director of the Washington chapter of CAIR, said in a March 1st news conference, quote, "It's been more than a month after the young man was found dead hanging from a tree, and yet there are many questions unanswered and many leads uninvestigated. We just want to make sure that the expertise, The experience and the human resources of the FBI are brought to make sure everything is comprehensively investigated and no stone is left unturned.
That's great.
Which I think is completely fair.
Absolutely.
CARE also stated that the Keita family believed police hadn't interviewed 4 co-workers of Ben's who they think may know something about his death. That's a big deal.
That's it. I mean, let's get on it.
Yeah, get on it, right? Bukhari said, quote, "For that to happen and this much time to have lapsed causes us to wonder about whether this investigation was as comprehensive as it should have been. That's why we want to bring in the federal investigators." A representative from CARE Washington went on to say that the family, quote, "wants to know that their community is safe for all young people, including people of color and religious minorities," end quote. In a show of support, Reverend Kel Brown, the pastor of Seattle Plymouth Church, also spoke in support of the Keita family. Quote, "Today we are careful not to rush to judgment. However, we are also careful to acknowledge that in this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, where one must still declare Black Lives Matter and where Islamophobia is alive and well, there must be a thorough investigation into the death of this young man." Reporters at the news conference asked the CARE panel whether there was evidence of prejudice having anything to do with this case or tainting the investigation, but they were not offered any specifics from CARE. Bukhari simply added, quote, "There are many things that we want to find out about," end quote.
Well, I think for me, it's more like the unanswered questions. That's what could point to that.
Sure. Stuff that doesn't even involve racism or a hate crime, just generally like what happened here.
Right.
Even if it was a suicide, connect the dots for me.
Right.
Like,
right. It's not making sense.
Lead me from point A to point B. Show me how he got the rope. Show me how he was in the woods. You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The Keita family and CARE also asked the public to step forward with any information that they may have. The Lake Stevens Police Department welcomed assistance to the case. And as a matter of fact, and I don't know, maybe unbeknownst to the Keitas and to CARE, they had already brought in the FBI on November 30th, 4 days after Ben was reported missing.
See, I love when I hear that because it irks me so much when I hear about these police departments that, because of pride, don't want to relinquish control to other organizations.
Right.
And I just think, thank goodness that they recognized, hey, we could use an extra set of hands here.
Yeah, so it turns out the FBI was already aware of this case, and the Lake Stevens Police Department had asked the FBI to come in specifically to forensically examine the family computers.
Okay, now that's interesting. The
It
computers.
is, right? FBI spokeswoman Ann Dietrich Williams told CNN, quote, "Our review is providing additional investigators to consider the situation and ensure that LSPD has covered all appropriate leads," end quote. In a separate statement, she said, quote, "We are aware of circumstances of the individual's death and will review them with consideration of federal law. If warranted, we may conduct further investigation. A review does not necessarily result in the opening of an investigation." And they've been very clear about that. I saw several articles when the FBI said, "We're just double checking this and we're not reopening the case. And we're not saying that anything that the Lake Stevens Police Department did was wrong or incorrect."
But I think that's fair. I think it's
Yeah.
fair. Let me just look at it, make sure we're not missing something.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Now, as you can imagine, this was a big deal in Lake Stevens. A big deal. Lots of reporters coming in, lots of scrutiny on the police department. So even the mayor wound up getting involved. Lake Stevens Mayor John Spencer responded by saying that he and others in the town were saddened by Ben's death. And his goal at the time was to, quote, "bring people together to talk about the issues because everyone should feel safe, welcome, and respected." He added, "It is a shock to our soul, and it is a tragic event."
Well, I agree with that. One of the things we did before we hit record was I just Googled a picture.
Yeah.
And he just looked like a little boy.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't. He was an 18-year-old young man. But just,
he looks like a kid.
My mama heart just broke.
Yeah. And we're going to have that picture on our Instagram account of Ben. And he just looks like an innocent kid.
Right, right. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was just, oh, he's just a baby. He's just
Yeah.
a baby.
I feel like the older we get, the more everybody's going to look like a baby, Cynthia.
I know,
But
but
it's true. I mean, he's a kid, you know?
yeah, and just no matter what happened here, pure tragedy.
Absolutely it is. Now, in response to all the publicity, Dr. Daniel Salove, the county medical examiner, also issued a statement talking about his change in the manner of death. He said, quote, "An undetermined ruling does not exclude homicide or suicide. The evidence is just not conclusive enough to provide a high degree of confidence for either determination. The police and prosecutors will make final determinations about whether there is evidence that a crime was committed." And I think he's very fair to just say, I'm just staying in my lane. I don't know what caused it. I'm just telling you what I found.
I feel like that's the only thing you can do.
Right.
The only thing you can do is say, here's what I know.
Here's what I know. Right. At the end of March, the Lake Stevens police closed their investigation into Ben's death, concluding once again that all evidence indicated Ben took his own life. On March 31st, 2017, 195 pages of the case file were released under the state public records law. This is a big deal to me.
Yes, and tell me what we found.
According to police records, there was no sign of a struggle or foul play. There were no injuries except those caused by the rope. No evidence turned up that Ben had been bullied. The only issue the investigators found in Ben's life was that he had stopped going to school and he had told coworkers there were problems at home.
Oh.
He had few friends and rarely left his house. The Keita family and CARE still believe there is more work that needs to be done. Bakari, on behalf of CARE, said, quote, "The specific ask was for a full investigation, not simply to be in touch," meaning that the FBI should have done more.
Okay. Because I'm assuming the FBI is probably asked to get involved in a lot of investigations, which is resources, time, money, manpower. If you review everything and there's absolutely nothing there, I don't know. Maybe the right thing is for them to just, no, we're going to start over. We're going to do our own investigation and make sure nothing was missed. I mean,
Well,
as a family member, that's what I would want.
sure, sure. And I don't know. Obviously, I didn't read all 195 pages of this police file, but CARE added that there were many questions that remain unanswered and many more that were raised in the police files, like the fact that no one was ever able to answer why he had stopped going to school. As part of the argument for an additional investigation, CARE released their intake report that was completed when the Keitas first contacted them. It's dated January 11th, so 2 days after the group of teens found Ben's body in the woods. The teens told officers that they had gone there after school to smoke marijuana, and one of them saw Ben after leaving the trail and climbing over a log. How is it possible that this teen was able to find this body when searches that included professionals and a cadaver dog were not able to find him?
Unless he wasn't there.
Unless he wasn't there, which is always the kind of question mark. What's funny is based on the evidence, you can't tell either way.
Well, that's the real bummer is you can't tell how long he's been deceased,
Right,
which would tell us a lot.
right. The CARE report says that Ben's mother alleged that the Lake Stevens police chief, John Dyer, asked her if her son could have been courted by religious extremist groups, possibly for money, when she interpreted it as a slight to Ben's character or maybe a reason to not thoroughly investigate his possible homicide. In response to this accusation, Chief Dyer responded, quote, "Absolutely in no way, shape, or form did I ever make the suggestion that this kid was a terrorist," end quote. He said that race and religion only came up because investigators asked if Ben had experienced bullying or discrimination. CARE later said that the intake report was written after the first interview with Ben's mother, and she was still in shock, and his family was out of the country. And so maybe she was just speaking out of grief or fear. But whatever it was, she felt like the line of questioning was not like it should have been.
I can see how that would be a very touchy line of questioning.
Right. But Chief Dyer says that is absolutely not what I meant by that. Not that Ben was the one that could have been creating trouble, but that somebody could have been creating trouble for him.
I can absolutely see it from all angles. We want them to ask all the questions, right? We want them to ask all the questions.
Sure.
I can also understand how certain questions might feel judgmental.
Yeah, sure. Now, based on this care report, we also find that the family's suspicion of racism went well beyond law enforcement. Records show that Keita's also accused a neighbor of lying about her home surveillance system. The neighbor's camera was positioned in a way that could have captured Ben leaving home. The neighbor told police the camera's memory was full and it was not recording during that time. The Keitas refused to accept that answer and were eventually accused of harassing the neighbor, asking for this video footage. Care also suggested Ben had been dead for 15 days before he was found, which would have meant he was alive for weeks after he went missing. Now, I'm not sure what evidence they used to say he wasn't there all 6 weeks, but again, there's no conclusive evidence to say one way or the other. Additional details from the released police report revealed that on the day Ben was found, another of his neighbors approached the police. She recalled seeing a flashlight in the woods the night Ben went missing. She said it didn't seem unusual to her at the time because young people were known to frequent those woods, sometimes with flashlights. The teens who found Ben acknowledged that they touched his body, initially thinking it could have been a prank, which seems like a very bizarre prank. I'm not really
it seems like a very bizarre response to me. Teenagers?
I don't know. I know they were out there doing drugs. So,
okay.
I don't know that explains it, but they fully admitted to having touched his body. Maybe this explains it. They originally touched him to check for identification, which also does seem strange to me.
This is, I mean,
no, I'm sorry. There's no reason.
Because here's the thing. I'm assuming it is very obvious he's deceased.
Right.
He's more than likely been here for some time. He's partially frozen.
Right.
So it's clear this is a deceased body. I think for anyone to say, you know what, I'm just going to go touch this body or look for identification, that's strange. Let alone a teenager. That's your teenage response. That's not what I would be doing.
It's not what I would be doing either. And remember, you had asked about the flashlight.
Oh no, I have not forgotten about the flashlight. I'm waiting for answers on this flashlight.
Well, here's what I'll tell you about that. While looking in his pockets for identification, they found the flashlight in his pocket and took the flashlight out and held the flashlight. So when police arrived at the scene, police said, "Hey, can you put that flashlight down? Because it's evidence." So tainted.
Or convenient.
That's what the argument would be on the other direction. Sure.
Because I'm sorry, I'm still not convinced this is a suicide. I'm not convinced. Now, I have no idea what it was or why or anything else, because it doesn't really seem like a blaring homicide either. There's still questions there.
I agree.
But
and again, we'll go back to the flashlight and the rope. His parents didn't recognize either of them.
Right. Now, okay, for some reason, when I heard flashlight, I'm envisioning either like a big mag light or like a flashlight. I wasn't envisioning something pocket sized. So I guess I still don't know. Is it one of those teeny tiny? Was it completely hidden in his pocket?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because to me, that would be easier to not recognize. I don't know. Does my 20-year-old son have a flashlight pocket size that I've never seen?
Or one that he kept in his car or something like that.
Right. As opposed to like a giant mag light that I'm very aware lives in our home.
I don't get the feeling this was like an industrial flashlight. Right. Nobody has ever said that. Because, man, those mag lights are like weapons. Oh, they're enormous and heavy. Yes. So I don't get the feeling it was that.
Or even one of those that's like 8 inches long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I don't know the description of the flashlight. I just know it was able to be in his pocket.
Okay.
Again, as I've said, detectives to this day have not been able to determine the source of the rope. And unfortunately, where the rope was tied around the branch on the tree, weather conditions have destroyed any chance of finding DNA.
Well, of course. Of course.
Now,
what about the noose part.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Now, on the lower knot, DNA was found from Ben and an unknown person.
Okay, Stephanie, literally, I just got chills here.
Yeah.
And not the good kind.
Not the good kind. Now, forensic scientists compared the second profile to genetic samples from officials, from the teens who found Ben's body, and basically anyone else who was involved in the recovery to essentially rule
Of
out,
course,
right?
Of course. I mean, these kids are touching this body.
Yeah. They even went a step further and asked the teens' families to provide their DNA. Like, what if they were concealing it for someone else in their family? What if somebody else was involved? Now, most of the family members complied, but some declined to offer their DNA, which I get. I mean, it may be a bit of a stretch. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't. What are you hiding, Stephanie?
Well, I know this is ridiculous, but I won't even sign up for the Ancestries or like any of these DNA sites because I don't know. I'm a little possessive of my DNA. I don't know.
I mean, I'm with you, but see, my parents have already done it.
So you're doomed.
So yeah, I'm just like, well, thanks a lot, guys. If I ever commit a crime,
I will eventually cave and do it. I know that I will. I'm just going to hold out as long as possible.
Right. But I think in a situation like this, where you're trying to rule me out and I haven't done anything wrong, you know what I mean? I'm not just like selling my DNA to somebody who could do whatever with it.
Okay, fair.
This is like an actual crime where we're actually trying to help somebody. But I know I'm innocent.
But then you're in the database.
Well, that is true. That's true.
So you would do it for the greater good.
I would do it for the greater good.
Okay.
Because I'm a good person. And that's not a judgment.
Wow.
No.
Wow. Now it comes out. You're like, well, if you want to be stingy with your DNA and not solve a crime against an innocent 18-year-old, that's fine, Stephanie. I get it.
Totally not what I meant, but if the shoe fits.
I see how we're starting out the new year, Cynthia. I see how this is going.
New year, new me.
Wow, savage.
That's right.
Savage.
No, my point is, I think I would do it just because I'm trying to help somebody. But I get all the reasons why you would be stingy with your DNA. And, I only find it slightly suspicious. That's all I'm saying.
Only slightly. I'll take that. I always want to be a little bit of a mystery.
Well, I can tell you after this conversation, I've got some questions.
We'll talk about it off air. Well, unfortunately, I have to tell you that no DNA matches were found to the DNA on the rope.
So I don't know, though, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's good in that it wasn't accidental DNA, which means it does tell us that somebody else touched this rope. If it had come back to one of the investigators or one of the teenagers, then it really doesn't tell us much, right?
Sure.
So the fact that there is this unknown DNA tells us something.
Something, right?
But it doesn't tell us who because there's no match. So I'm assuming it's somebody who's not committed a crime before and had to submit DNA.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, again, we don't even know where the rope came from. So maybe it was the previous owner of the rope that didn't borrow the rope from, or the guy that worked at the hardware store.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Now, granted, it was found on the knot, but I don't know.
Okay, so one of the things Stephanie and I talked about before we hit record was I asked, and this is probably a silly thought, but it's my thought. Because this is a place where teenagers were known to hang out, it's in the woods, and this rope and the placement of it just makes so little sense. Could this rope have already been there? So I'm thinking like a tire swing or a rope swing. And maybe that comes to mind.
Just like an innocuous, innocent, just a rope in the woods.
Here's why I bring that up. I used to live kind of out in the woods when I was a child. And we had a swing that was literally a rope and a broomstick tied like a broomstick horizontal.
So you were already riding the broomstick very early in your life, Cynthia.
Hey.
If the broomstick fits,
Sure does. That was there when I was 7. To this day, if you go to that tree out in the middle of the woods, there is a rope hanging.
I've seen it myself. And a good rope can last for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. So your theory was, since it was attached so far up. Now, I've seen 2 reports. I've seen the branch was as far up as 50 feet, could have been as low as 30. I don't care.
Only 30
Only,
feet.
You know what I'm saying? Like, either way, Why on earth would you go that high?
You don't have to.
No.
But you don't have to either way. You don't have to go that high for suicide. And you don't have to go that
I agree.
high if you're staging a suicide.
I agree.
I would think maybe, I'm just trying to think. If I were trying to kill somebody and I was going to make it look like they hung themselves, I'd probably go as high as I could because you don't want them walking away from this. I don't know.
But you're going to climb 50 foot into a tree? Like, to even have the ability to do that, how many people can actually try, like, climb a 50-foot tree?
Oh, I can't climb a 10-foot tree.
And listen, I'm not Edward Cullen, can't just
Right.
fly up a tree.
Right.
Anyway, I'm just saying, it's weird. So your idea was maybe somebody had put something innocuous in this tree and then Ben wandered into the woods, found this rope, and fashioned a noose out of it. And
that was an idea, but it's a stretch.
And then the DNA in the noose could have been somebody who had previously used the rope for whatever other reason.
Right. And you could go along with the same idea even if it was a homicide, that these, say it's teenagers who are bullying him. They know this rope is here and they take him out there and they kill him that way. I was just saying it's an idea as to how the rope could have potentially got there, maybe. And it's a stretch. It's not a good theory.
No. But... Okay, so we're already talking 30 to 50 feet. It was connected to the tree. The noose itself was 8 feet above the ground.
So that, I've never tied a noose or fashioned a noose. I don't know how to do it, but is that possible? It seems like somebody had to have been there with something to climb on.
And Ben's feet were almost a yard above the ground.
Right. No, I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense. I feel like somebody else had to be there with something. Could you drive into the woods? Like, is it possible to, like, take a pickup truck back there and stand on the bed of a pickup truck and tie a noose that way, or and then drive off?
I mean, this was off the trail, so I don't know that a vehicle would have been able to go through. I mean, maybe some kind of four-wheeler or something.
Well, and we're talking about, like, the woods in Washington.
If he had been up there the whole 6 weeks, there had been snow, well, would you have seen, like, tracks or wheel tracks? I don't know.
Was there a lot of snow at some point during the time he went missing to the time he was found that had then melted? Probably not, because it's January. Well, it's not melting.
Well, and when it would have happened, if you believe he was there the full 6 weeks, even if you don't, it would still been November or December. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know there would have been that much, because he was found in January. You know what I mean? I think the snow would have been higher than when he would have originally been placed there.
Right. Yeah, I kind of, yeah.
So, it's, I don't know. Now, I will say police have tried to explain this, because to me, it defies logic. If his neck was broken, I would have been like, okay, well, he climbed up there and then he jumped off. But the fact that there wasn't some real trauma to his body, to me, indicates that did not happen. So what police have said is that there were 2 other large trees that were uprooted and kind of leaning on the tree where Ben died. And they theorize he could have climbed those down trees toward the limb where the rope was tied. They admit it was too icy on the day that he disappeared to climb any further. But according to authorities, there were pieces of bark on these trees that were disturbed. They believe that these disturbances could, quote, possibly be left by Ben ascending the trees, end quote.
Well, how far up did these down trees go? Because even if they went, say, let's be generous and say 20 feet, they took them up 20 feet. You still got 30 feet to climb.
I'm with you. I've never seen a diagram of these trees. I've never seen pictures of these trees. And as a matter of fact, they are very rarely mentioned anywhere. So I don't know if this is just them grasping at straws, them trying to come up with a theory, because, I mean, they're admitting it's weird. I think they're just trying to come up with possible ways he could have done it. It's a theory. I don't know if it's a good one.
Well, and without knowing more about the trees, I guess I can't say either way. I mean, it's, I guess, the most logical thing we've heard so far. But if it were obviously that, then I feel like we would be talking about it more.
Sure.
I feel like there wouldn't be all the questions. So that tells me we're kind of reaching.
Yeah.
Until you can tell me or how he got himself up there, I just don't buy it. I don't. I don't know what happened, but I just don't think he did it.
I really don't know in this case.
Was
Now,
he an avid tree climber? Because I'm telling you, I'm not lying. I've never climbed a tree in my life. And unless it was one with like a bunch of branches.
he was an 18-year-old man. And so I think there's a certain amount of athletic ability. But again, he spent most of his time in his room playing video
Exactly.
games. So he's not an outdoorsy guy. He didn't participate in after school sports. Wasn't his thing.
Right. And these are, I'm assuming, pine trees, like pine type
Evergreen pine
which
trees, sure.
I think probably are easier to climb. They're more
Sure.
limby. Because I'm imagining
like an oak tree. Right. No.
which is impossible to climb.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. I mean, you literally have to like scale it like a palm tree, you know, like
right.
wrap your arms around it. No, it would have been a pine tree.
Okay, so that does
But
kind
again,
of
think about it.
change
The only abrasion he had on his whole body, besides his neck from the rope, was a little cut on his finger.
And climbing a tree,
I would think you would get more cuts and scrapes and bruises.
especially a pine tree, because they're prickly, they're sharp,
right,
and they have rough, thorny bark.
Right. Now, as a follow-up to the Keita's family accusation that they hadn't followed up on interviews, they did go back and interview the McDonald's coworkers. Ben's coworkers at McDonald's.
What did we learn?
But unfortunately, everything they got from these coworkers actually pointed back to the suicide theory. Coworkers described Ben as polite and quiet, and he did tell one of them that he wanted to leave home. Another coworker said Ben told her his house wasn't a happy place. He reported describing lots of arguing and said his father was often away on business. However, these coworkers didn't find his complaints anything more than the usual complaining of a teenager. Which, yeah, I mean, I think all teenagers might have some complaints about this. I don't know about the arguing, but you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's like, well, I can't wait to get out of my house. Like, what 18-year-old doesn't say that on occasion? Right. So that's kind of what they thought. Like, there was nothing like he was being abused or there was like severe neglect or anything like that. He was just like, yeah, my parents argue, my mom's on my case, my dad's away at business, I can't wait to move out.
What did the parents say about this? Because this is the second time now we've heard that he said there's problems at home. So if I feel like if I were, I don't know, maybe that would be too hard. Maybe that would just be too hard as a parent to think maybe my child chose to do this because he was unhappy at home. So I just can't even go there. But I would think there might be some self-reflection and I don't know.
If there have been any public statements about these accusations, I have never been able to find them.
Okay. So
I did not find any, not saying they haven't responded to them. I did not find any evidence that they have.
That would be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the deal. I think even admitting and saying, yeah, you know, we weren't a perfect family.
Well, who is?
And who is? This is my point. I think you would actually get more credit by saying, yeah, we fought about this or that, or he didn't sign up for classes in time, or I thought he spent too much time playing video games, or I thought he should be working more hours. Yeah, we had this issue, but that doesn't mean he committed suicide.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? I think almost admitting to it makes the chance of suicide even less possible. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does.
The fact that they've been mute on it almost makes it weirder to me. As an additional aside, detectives also explored whether any hate groups were operating in the area, but they found none. In the end, this is a family who tragically lost their son regardless of how it happened. The Keitas continue to speak about their love for their son. Aissata Keita, Ben's mother, said she misses her son. She remembers a respectful and generous young man who looked after his younger siblings. She said, quote, "I'm very sad. My heart is broken."
Oh, and mine is too.
I know.
For her. As the mother of a 20-year-old now.
Yeah.
I can relate to some of this. Of course, he's like, don't want to be in your house. And I'm like, oh, just wait.
Feelings mutual, bucko.
and we have a great relationship. But it's natural.
It is absolutely natural for young men, especially.
Right. To want to leave the nest.
Yes.
That's good. That's healthy. And I remember being that age and thinking, I cannot wait till I get out of here and get to do what I want. And now I'm just like, wow, those were the days.
Isn't that the truth?
Right.
The way I think about it is you have this independence, yet you have no experience.
And a frontal lobe isn't fully
And-
formed.
Well, that's true too.
I look back now at the things I did, and I was a good kid. I wasn't doing drugs or bad stuff, but I just look back now at the stupid stuff I did when I was 18, thinking nothing bad's ever going to happen. Or the stuff that matters to you, thinking being popular matters, thinking being pretty matters. Like just all the,
Right.
it's the perspective.
Right. Or people's opinions of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Stuff that now I'm just like, oh man, I wish that I could go to my 18-year-old self and be
Yeah.
like, hey, guess what? You are not going to care about this
Yeah.
at all. And this thing here that right now makes you weird, you know what? One day that's going to make you cool. All of this to say, those years are so hard for some people. And it just breaks my heart to think he potentially was in such a sad place that he chose to end his life. Or on the other hand, if someone hurt him, you know, what beautiful future might he have had that was stolen? So it's just such a loss, I guess is what I'm just trying to say. So not eloquently, it's just such a loss of a beautiful human life.
I agree. And again, regardless of what happened, this family has lost their son. People have lost their friend. Siblings have lost their brother. It's just, it sucks. It just
awful.
sucks.
It's awful.
Now, this is our first episode of the month. So Ben Keita's case also represents one of our Branch of Hope nonprofit organizations. So we have decided to sponsor the Victim Connection Resource Center, which is a referral helpline where crime victims can learn about their rights and options confidentially and compassionately. They handle victims' needs for assault, child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, elder abuse and neglect, financial fraud, homicide and grief, human trafficking, mass violence, sexual assault, stalking, and, as it relates to this episode, hate crimes.
Wow. They see some tough stuff.
Victim Connection Resource Center, or VCRC, is a weekday phone, chat, and text-based referral helpline operated by the National Center for Victims of Crime. Services are available for all victims of crime in the United States and its territories. Visitors to the hotline receive strength-based and trauma-informed services and referrals in over 200 languages.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
It's amazing.
The victim assistance specialists receive extensive training and mentoring to provide emotional support, information, and referrals that empower visitors as they navigate the physical, emotional, legal, and financial consequences of crime. Referrals are tailored to individual needs and can be made to local, state, and national organizations.
Oh.
Now, if you are the victim of a crime and you feel like you could benefit from this service, you can call them now. Call or text 1-855-4-VICTIMS. So that's 855-484-2846, or you can find them and chat online.
That's really amazing, Stephanie. I don't think I've heard of that organization before, but
really excited to highlight them and spotlight what they're doing. I feel like even for the Keita family, where they feel like they've been taken advantage of, or they feel like their family has experienced some form of hate crime, these resources could really help them with these support groups. And someone like the Keita family who maybe isn't aware that groups like CARE exist, they can contact this hotline to be placed in touch.
I love it. Beautiful work in such a beautiful broad spectrum of people that they help.
Absolutely. 200 languages?
Right. And types of victims and types of
And I love
crimes.
that they don't even refer to them as victims.
Right.
They refer to them as visitors.
Right.
And we're just a visitor in this part of our lives in this phase, and you're traveling through.
Okay. Something about that, Stephanie, just kind of got me a little teary.
I think it's a great way to start the new year.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, Shiver Seekers. Yeah, it's the case of Ben Keita. And It's a bit of a strange one and a heavy one, right?
Oh, no, this is...
I started emotionally charged. It's just a lot. It's heavy.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
heavy
really
case.
sad. It's really sad.
Yeah. Find us on Instagram. I'm going to post some pictures of Ben and any other photos that I can find that may paint a clearer picture to let you kind of see what you think happened
That's right.
in this scenario.
And stick around for next week, where I'm going to bring you the first of a two-parter of the Karen Reed case.
Yes. You have been working on this case for a while.
Oh, so long. That's why I wanted to cover it, and I'll tell you more about it next week.
Yeah.
I wanted something that was like a little more precise that you could just listen to in 2 episodes.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So tune in next week.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Shiver Seekers. Go out and do great things today.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.